We'll start segment two, Gold and Black Live. Very special guest here. We're always grateful for the time that President Mitch Daniels makes for us, and he has done that throughout his tenure. A very devoted sports fan, and obviously has proven that in his time in West Lafayette as Purdue's president. Welcome to the show. I know this is going to be as your farewell tour is well in process. This is going to be a highlight for you, I know.
Well, don't make a joke about that. That it is a highlight, Alan. It's been fun, and you know how right you are. I'm a pretty irrational sports fan, and of course, especially Purdue fan.
Yeah, it's obviously been a lot of highs in your time, some challenges certainly, just in terms of the teams. Last night, I don't know, and I don't know that you were there or not. I assume
I was
you
there.
were. Yeah, and of course the win over Marquette, young basketball team. This is a team that is going to be fun to watch. You've watched a lot of basketball in your life. What do you see when you're watching that team out there?
I love this team.
Yeah,
I've been telling people for some time that I think we'll probably be underestimated, and that outperform what the know-it-alls were forecasting ahead of the season, in part because it's a young team and presumably will just get better and better with the experience. But I just also think we're just loaded with talent. Some of it people haven't noticed. Some of it was redshirted, for instance, and some of it was injured.
Yeah.
Brian Waddell. And so just think of the game so far, how many different players Matt's used. And they've all contributed one way or another. And I'll tell you one other thing that maybe you and I have talked about before. This is just me now. I love how homegrown this team is.
Yeah.
I grew up in an era when, more or less, if you went to watch an Indiana team, it was our guys against their guys.
Yeah. And
that's pretty much gone in the free agent, transfer portal, one and done kind of world. But Coach Painter has done such a great job of recruiting where there's a lot of talent, always has been. And so at one point last night, I pointed out to my guests, you're looking right now at the number one and number two high school players from last year and the number one and number two players from the year before that.
Yeah.
On the floor at the same time. To me, that's fun, and it's going to be fun because I expect that most, if not all, those young men will play 4 years.
And you've watched a lot of Purdue sports teams over your time. It's always amazing to me, and it's probably even changed during your tenure to some extent. These freshmen, it doesn't seem to matter anymore. If you're Braden Smith and you're a freshman and Fletcher Lawyer, you don't need to wait till you're a junior or senior to be who you are. You're just like your best Purdue students. They come in ready to go, and these guys do it on the athletic courts and fields, and they're showing it at a very young age.
Isn't it amazing? And obviously, Coach Painter believes that. Very first game, there you got two freshman guards starting. Again, that's just fun, and it just whets your appetite knowing how many more times you'll get to enjoy watching them play.
Well, tomorrow, Coach Jeff Brom's team will have senior day. Northwestern comes to town. Again, when you started at your tenure, football was in a far different place than it is now. It's shoulder to shoulder in Ross-Ade Stadium, looking at probably a near sellout crowd, if not a sellout crowd for Northwestern on senior day. Just talk about how that's evolved, and not only the job that Jeff Brom has done, but the fact that this has become a thing to do again. It wasn't that way early on in your tenure, but it has certainly become that way in Ross-Ade Stadium.
You're right. It wasn't that way. We were in a little bit of a down patch. Because I have so much fun doing it, I always roam all over the stadium before the game and during parts of the game, and see as many folks as I can see. And when people remark on that, I tell them, my first couple years, I felt like I should go thank every single fan personally for being there. And some days it didn't feel like it was that hard to do. That's all so different now, and the energy in there is sellout after sellout. It's really a tribute to Mike Babinski, and to, of course, Coach Brom and his assistants. What they've done, not easy to be as competitive as they are at Purdue University, and yet they are pulling it off. You know, how typical was last week, by the way? We have a couple of off weeks, and then we go beat a ranked team. I mean, that is I guess that's what we're becoming known for. But you know, the Saturday should be real exciting. Hey, I'll tell you one other thing that has been really gratifying to me. I have always encouraged the athletic department to do whatever it could to make it more convenient, more affordable, and more attractive for students to come to all our sporting events. You know, to me, one student is worth 2 or 3 adults in terms of the atmosphere of the place. Plus, it really should be for them, first and foremost. And we've had record student sections this year, all time. You know, by one measure, our student sections alone, 12,000 fans, 12,000 student fans. And then there, you know, I run into students all over the rest of the stadium, so I don't know what the total is, but I really like that. And I think that really has been another contributor to just the great environment we've had.
Well, I think one of the things that's been interesting, Mackey Arena has kind of set the tone for that, but Beeland Court and volleyball, I mean, you got Coach Dave Shondell's team, not only a high level of competition and skill and nationally ranked year in and year out, but even to see that, it's a smaller venue, no question, but the students just drive the train, so to speak, in that facility as well.
Absolutely. And that's the way it ought to be.
Yeah, they just have been such a big driver in that. All right, when you came here too, you know, obviously when you take a job and you start into something and you think you know all of how it's going to work and you project the things, athletics has continued to evolve. There's no secret that the money's gotten bigger, the contracts have gotten bigger. And yet, as you look down the landscape of this, how does this continue to evolve at the level that it has? I mean, is it sustainable the way it is? Purdue has always had an ability to keep it at a dull roar, I would say, but it's getting to be a bigger and bigger challenge as the money gets more and more in college intercollegiate athletics.
I think Purdue's in a better position than most, in part because we have a history of good stewardship. Certainly under Mike, but certainly Morgan, and even his predecessors. And so unlike some of our competitors, we're not staring at big deficits every year and wondering whether they might get worse. And secondly, we're very fortunate to be in the Big Ten with all the success that's come with that, probably greater financial subsidy or support coming from that direction in the future. I think that we ought to be able to sustain here, to use your term. We also have somewhat fewer sports than some of our competitors have chosen to have, and that can create problems for them that we don't have. Some of them have been trimming other sports lately. You know, we just landed a nationally renowned tennis coach. From Minnesota. I thought, great, how'd that happen? It's because Minnesota closed their program. And so that's a sign of the times. So I don't see Purdue, I see Purdue being in a much stronger shape going forward. We need to be vigilant about that. You know, that doesn't mean I think the college landscape is optimal. I think there's some big issues out there that threaten certainly smaller schools, other schools, sports at other schools, as I just said. And if somebody doesn't do something that puts some boundaries around it, you know, might eventually diminish the enthusiasm, the fun of it all. If it just becomes, at least in a sport or two, if it just becomes a professional sports that happens to happen on a college campus, paid athletes, maybe unionized athletes, this may be where things have to wind up. But I'm sure it'd be a commercial success. I just don't know if it will be quite as good an enhancement of the college experience as it's always been.
Yeah, and that's going to be a real challenge. All right. Now, you're welcome to break news on this show anytime you want. Now, if you want to tell us that you're going to be the next czar of the NCAA or college football or whatever whatever your aspirations are, but as you look at this, and no matter what, you're going to be an engaged person after your days at Purdue about how all this will turn out. How do you look at the challenges of having the money that's there? Obviously, we talked about that, but things like name, image, and likeness, transfer portal, all those factors, COVID, it's a perfect storm. And the role of the president is really, really interesting. And I guess my question really goes back to, what is that? How does that role sustain itself? And as you talk to your colleagues, how do you view what ultimately your responsibility is not to just intercollegiate athletics, but obviously to your universities?
I'm not sure, and others have made this observation. I'm not sure we can say that college presidents as a group have exercised enough leadership, enough direction of events, and I'm as guilty as anyone. Listen, I'll confess, I put a lot of time and a lot of attention into Purdue athletics.
Yeah,
and we just talked about how excited and interested I am in that. Not as much as I could have put into Big Ten decision making, and I haven't spent any time at the NCAA as a few presidents have. So I'm culpable, if anyone is, but. That said, I think it would be a good thing if presidents did assert themselves more. If this is supposed to remain college sports. Now, I've said and written elsewhere that maybe at least in the revenue sports, we're moving to a different model. And maybe that's inevitable. The TV dollars are a really big driver here. Alan, one thing is that college presidents turn over. Whereas conference commissioners and staffs tend not to for long periods of time. I looked around recently, and to my shock, discovered or realized I'm the senior president of the Big Ten by 3 years.
Yeah.
And there are several people there who are brand new.
Yeah.
And new to this whole arena. Soon, Mung will be in that position here from Purdue, but he'll be in a lot of company. There are new presidents all over the place. And in that situation, they're a little bit of a handicap hearing about all these issues, some of them for the very first time. So that's not an excuse for the way things have run off and left us in some ways, but maybe it explains a little bit, how we got where we are.
And with President Cheng coming in, and I know you won't speak for him and not exactly how he's going to manage and operate, but just maybe an overview of what you see his role or how he views athletics from the perspective of an intercollegiate and produced place in the marketplace, so to speak.
He understands what an important part of the overall college experience it is. He understands how important it is to maintaining contact with people after they graduate from Purdue. Shortly before we talked here, I was chairing the meeting of the Purdue for Life Foundation. That's what our rebuilt and I think vastly improved alumni organization is called Purdue for Life for a reason. We think that the contract with people is, come to Purdue, and the first 4 years may be the most important, but we're here on an ongoing basis. You're going to need to keep learning for life, make connections for life, so forth. Well, athletics is really an important part of that for many of our graduates. He gets all that. And I know he'll be an avid supporter, probably in different ways, than I have. You probably won't see Where's Mung at the football games. He'll have to find his own way, but he'll be a supporter. And I certainly have counseled him that, as excited as I am about all these subjects, I tried never to intrude, to micromanage, to hover over either the AD or any coaches. They knew anything they wanted me to do, just ask. But I wasn't going to barge in, and I hope I've kept to that. I think he understands that that's the right mode of operating.
All right, well, you're a competitive person, and that's a part of Purdue people are, whether it's in academics or athletics. That's part of our fabric, certainly. What in terms of behind the scenes or something, what is maybe your favorite, when some of your favorite things you've gotten to do in the athletics realm? I mean, we've all were there when the Tyler Trent game over Ohio State and the big wins and maybe some of the tough losses, all those kinds of things. But maybe the behind the scenes or something that quietly really is something that lights your wick about your relationship with Purdue's athletic department and Purdue athletes in general.
Well, again, as much as I would have enjoyed it, I don't go in the locker room and all that sort of thing. Only ever once, as I recall. But so many great memories. I'll give you one: the Matt Harms tip-in. So I was down at IU. One of my very, very good friends is a guy who remains the only person to quarterback IU to the Rose Bowl. And so he and I had a friendly rivalry about that. He comes to the IU game up here, and I've gone many years down to Bloomington, and I was there that night. And if you remember that game, the IU fans got really out of hand. I mean, they do anyway. Yeah. They're very embarrassing. I mean, I couldn't be president of a place like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're yelling a lot of obscenities, and for some reason, they were on Matt Harms all game long. And I mean, all the worst kind of language. And I looked at my friend with about, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes to go. I said, it would be really appropriate if Matt won this, what was a tight game all the way. And of course, he did.
Yeah.
What was it, a missed free throw or something? He tips it in right in front of the IU student section.
Yeah.
and we leave with the win. That was choice.
Yeah. All wins over Indiana in Bloomington are big ones. That wasn't one of the world's most artistic basketball games, as I recall. But yes, and so you were a friend of Harry Gonzo, huh? The great Hurricane Hoosier team that somehow beat Purdue to get to the Rose Bowl at the end of that. So that's a good memory and certainly a fun one because and again, a guy like a Matt Harms and some of the great personalities that have been around Purdue sports, again, people that have really brought a lot to the university from that standpoint.
One thing that the athletic department has fairly often asked me to do is talk to a recruit or a recruit and his or her family. I'm always, happy to do that. Always hope that I'm, helping the cause. You're not really sure what the right things are to say or not say, but several times I have said to football recruits, yeah, sure, you've got a lot of talent. You can go. Michigan wants you, or Ohio State wants you, or Alabama wants you, and you can go there and you'll be on a good team. You might even get to play. We'll see. I said, but if you were to come here, and we go back to the Rose Bowl or go to, let's say the playoff or something.
Yeah.
You'll be known for life. At those other schools, you'll be on a great team, and 2 years later, you're just one of 100.
Yeah.
But you could be Drew Brees.
Yeah.
Right. Or one of the guys who played with him, or those guys, we still remember their names, right? From the 2 Rose Bowl teams and a couple of other great ones in between. And you mentioned Gonzo. Those guys haven't bought a free beer in some years.
John Eisenbarger, all those guys. Yeah. Yeah, that I think is an excellent point, and probably for certain people that's a good selling point. All right, some of the things that have been surprising during your time. I mean, you've written in the Washington Post and other places about some of the challenges of not only transfer portal but name, image, and likeness, and we can get into that a little bit. But USC and UCLA in the Big Ten, did that that become a surprising? It's certainly, again, maybe a testament to the fact that you never say never, or you never know exactly how things are going to work out. But here you go, you got 2 teams in the West Coast in the Big Ten.
I was surprised at the speed with which it was rushed through, and I already sort of hinted at that when I talked about the presidents being not necessarily in the saddle. But not at the idea. It had been sitting out there, and any idea that is attached, has a lot of TV dollars attached, somebody's going to push it for all they're worth. I don't know that it can't work. It may be exactly the right thing. I just think my own view is that let's now hit the pause button and walk around it. There are a lot of unanswered questions about how you're supposed to make this work. It appears that it will lead to more dollars, and that's turned a lot of people's head. I personally think that might be overestimated. In other words, the additional dollars by the time you've had the additional expenses, which going to include paying players.
Yeah.
By the time you've netted all that out, it may not be quite the bonanza that everybody's, thought in the first couple of weeks. So, can we just try to understand what scheduling will look like? What about all the other sports? How is that to be approached? Or will there be geographic divisions that somehow minimize the travel time? I don't pretend to understand, and I'm not sure anybody's got a design yet that explains that, let alone adding even more far away teams.
Yeah, going to be a really interesting thing to watch from afar. And you're right, hitting the pause button is one of the hardest things to do in the year 2022. I mean, it's just not in anybody's wheelhouse. I think that is about the truest statement you're going to find.
I mean, look how fast things have happened. Alan, it's only been a few months since Nigel Pack.
Yeah.
We were as far as I'm concerned, we were the first casualty of the pay-for-play era. At least the highly publicized. A player who would have fit our team very, very well, and if it comes from Indiana, he would have been able to showcase his abilities pretty darn well here, it seemed. And then we think we've got a great chance at him. And a few days after his visit here, somebody gives him $800,000. I don't blame him.
Yeah.
But just stop and think. That was, I think April.
Yeah.
Look at how far and how fast this whole thing has moved since then.
Yeah, no doubt. David Jenkins Jr. is pretty good. He was really impressive, in that win over Marquette and making some big shots. But yes, who would have predicted that? And maybe that also, in the long run, we can look back at this 5 to 10 years from now and say maybe, and I'm not predicting this definitely, but maybe that incident will allow, and maybe I'm being naive, but maybe allow a little bit of a leveling off and a reasonableness to take over at some point. Maybe I'm naive, though. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're naive.
There you go.
But there maybe someone will craft a way for some body, some organization, maybe some law that gets passed that puts a few boundary conditions around all this. But right now there are no limits. When this all started, listen, I've come to accept and I think endorse the idea that these young people should be able to make some money off their skills and their reputations. And right now it's really the Wild West, and that can't be the optimal end state. And I just don't. It would be good if somehow there were some boundaries. Another way to get there is, as many people really have always wanted, is to unionize the players, and then you impose the limits through a collective bargaining agreement. But I think there are things that would be unfortunate about that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing in terms of that. Is this Congress's problem to solve ultimately? Do you think do you think it seems to me it may have to be from a federal standpoint. I mean, nobody knows government better than you do in terms of, how you can foresee this finally getting, you're never going to put the genie totally back in the bottle, one would think, but at least get it to some level of a level playing field to some extent.
It could be. Certainly people have run up the hill, so to speak, and tried that out and haven't gotten very far. I mean, this Congress, as we all know, has had difficulty agreeing on a lot of less complicated things.
Yeah, no doubt.
So yeah, but that's theoretically, that's one way. Someone could be empowered, given antitrust immunity, for instance, to set some rules. Right now, the courts have said the NCAA can't do that. It's acting as a monopoly and price fixing, and that's we don't We don't do that in this country. So that was probably the correct ruling. But that means if Congress doesn't adjust that law or make an exception to it, somebody's got to find a different route.
Yeah. You've worked closely, obviously, with the Board of Trustees. They're your boss, but certainly folks, at least many of them that I'm familiar with, very supportive of college athletics and its role in the big picture. Yeah. You know, the Mike Berghoffs and the Gary Lamans of the word, Joanne Briette on down the line. I mean, it's been a very supportive group. Talk about that and that role from a board perspective, and obviously you work with them on a daily basis. But talk about that and the importance of that alignment between board, president, maybe athletics on down the road, and how that seems to be pretty good alignment at Purdue.
I've been so fortunate in this job in a variety of ways. One of them is the relationship with the mayors, the 2 local mayors, and our local communities. I've told my successor several times, you better hope these things continue and do what you can to preserve them. Well, the relationship with the board is another one. We have a great board, and you don't have to look very far to find some that don't function well at all. And ours is the best functioning one I know of. In every respect, we understand here at Purdue that they are the entrusted as trustees with the long-term success of this institution. It's their word that's law, not anybody who temporarily occupies the chair that I do. And so they have, I think, always had a strong but appropriate hand in everything, including athletics. You know, most college boards, or too many college boards, Alan, I think have walked away from some of their most important duties. They have let the academic enterprise just sort of go where it wants to. The one area where some boards have gotten overboard, so to say, or have gone too far is athletics. Yeah. Our board's never made that mistake. Thinking that was their principal role, or thinking that they should be calling the plays and picking all the coaches and so forth. So I think they've had the balance just right. Very interested, very supportive, but only involved to the up to the right line and no further. It's sort of the same approach I hope I've taken.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, providing some wisdom to our viewers and managing change. You had to do that. Anybody that's in your role has to be good at that. And yet it's never easy. You can't probably put that in a sentence or two, but talk about, just a mindset of dealing with it. And as Mung is going to have to deal with that, and we all will as a society as each year evolves. But what have you learned in your tenure of how I deal with change and things I may not have expected have happened? How do you best process that?
You have to think about the mission first, and in this case, the institution and its success and its future. You have to decide that if you're not prepared to try to make things better in very noticeable and material ways, then maybe you shouldn't be in the job. If you can't define or get other people together and agree on some significant changes, and then you just have to be determined to do them, knowing to a certainty that people will criticize and be uncomfortable about it, sometimes harsh and unfair and even personal. You have to just understand that in advance. It's absolutely inherent in making changes. No meaningful change ever happens without a counter reaction. But we've had really, I think, so little of that at Purdue. I think I feel so grateful that over these 10 years, a whole lot of things are different and new, and they've been appropriately debated, but I don't think actively or obstructed in the way you see other places. And also, people in this community, like most people, but certainly here, are pretty fair-minded. So I can name a lot of things we did that some people said, oh, that's a terrible idea, shouldn't do that. Then 3 or 4 years later, if it's working out okay, people will come around and say, well, I didn't like it at the time, but now I see.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. All right. We have had a fun experience for me over the years. We've done it at the Triple X counter, one of our sponsors. We've done it in your office. Really, I'll never forget that. Really, 2 weeks after COVID began, and you were gracious enough to talk to us. I've enjoyed and valued our relationship. We know it will continue long past your days, because I'm going to guess you look at our website from time to time to make sure you're caught up on what's going on. We appreciate that too so much. So we wish you the best. We wish you also a warm weather bowl for your last couple of days as
well, that'd be all right.
That'd be okay.
And I think I can see one in our future.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. We'll know a lot more after this weekend's game against Northwestern. Of course, Indiana next week. Who knows? Maybe Indianapolis. That would be fitting for you to have the first week in December down in Indianapolis. But we know in sports, it's one day at a time, one game at a time. And that's
well, when it's Purdue sports, you really know that.
No doubt. No doubt. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, Alan.
We're grateful for that. And we'll be back in 2 minutes. And Peyton Stovall, somebody that President Daniels knows well, is on the Purdue athletics staff. We'll talk a little bit about what his role has been in name, image, and likeness. And we're doing the best that he can to have the best student athlete experience. Peyton, a really sharp young man. We'll look forward to talking to that as we put an end to this show. We'll see you in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live.